Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our digital transformation live stream. This is a live stream we host each Tuesday to talk about all things related to digital transformation. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of success. And today's topic that we want to talk about in today's live stream is how to launch a career in consulting. So the whole idea here today is we want to have a panel discussion of some seasoned consultants to talk about how do you get into consulting if you aren't already in consulting. If you're in consulting, how can you further your career? How can you be a better consultant? What are some of the key things you need to be successful? What are the key success factors? All that stuff. We're here to give advice and just share some lessons on our careers in consulting. And part of the reason we're doing this is because Third Stage as a company is growing exponentially, and we are actively hiring people. So we thought what a great way to reach potential team members by having this sort of a discussion about how to launch a career in consulting. And by the way, if you are interested in learning more about careers at Third Stage Consulting, you can email us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com. We have offices in Denver, London, South Africa, and Australia as well. So if you're anywhere in the North America, Europe, and or Africa or Asia Pacific regions, we'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to introduce our guests in just a moment. But before I do, a couple logistical things. If you're joining us here today on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, we're watching the stream. So any questions you have, please drop those in the chat. We're gonna take audience questions throughout the discussion here today. I've got some questions to get us started, but would love to have you guys that are listening in jump in with questions or comments along the way as well. And speaking of comments, if you could just drop in the chat right now where in the world you're joining from, what city and country are you in? We'd love to hear where our global community is joining from today. And then last but not least, this recording will become part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast, which gets released every Wednesday. So a week from tomorrow, the episode of Transformation Ground Control that gets released will feature this interview as part of that segment. So be sure to check out that podcast. If you haven't already, you can subscribe on YouTube, or you can subscribe on audio podcast platforms throughout the world. It also streams to LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook as well. So thank you all for joining. And to introduce our panel here, I'll turn it to our guests here to do some quick introductions. Again, talking about launching your career in consulting, we've got a group of seasoned veterans in the consulting space. So this should be an interesting conversation to hear the good, the bad, the ugly of careers in consulting. And I'll just sort of go visually here clockwise with introductions. But joining me from all the team members here today, or all the panelists here today, are from the Third Stage Consulting team. And first we have Nate Stroeher, who's a practice lead at Third Stage. Nate, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, thanks, Eric. Nate Stroeher, and I am a Third Stage Consultant, practice lead, and have been in the consulting field for roughly 20 years. After I graduated from grad school, went to work for Deloitte Consulting and have a variety of different consulting experiences throughout my career, mostly in the digital transformation and the financial analytics field. Have also done a fair amount in change management as well. So excited to be here today and look forward to the panel discussion.
Great. Yeah, thank you for being here. And you're a longtime team member, and appreciate having you here and getting your insights here today. So also joining is our recently promoted director, Scott Janke, who's been on the team for a while now, but was recently promoted to director in our consulting practice. So Scott, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Scott Janke, director here at the Third Stage. Been consulting in operational roles for a good 25, 30 plus years. And much like Nate described, after I earned my MBA, I too also joined Deloitte, not together, but have spent the last 20 plus years, as I mentioned, in a lot of different roles, a lot of different industries. And we'll talk about some of those experiences on this call.
And you're also a former professor and PhD, so I failed to refer to you as Dr. Janke. I should refer to you as Dr. Scott Janke.
No worries. And actually, to this topic, I ran a master's program at one of the University of Texas campuses, and you can imagine the amount of questions I had from students asking how to get into consulting. So this is a par for the course for a lot of the work I've done.
Yeah, great. Well, it'd be great to get your perspective. And the reason, part of the interesting perspective you can bring to Scott is the kind of sort of the transitionary process you went through going from industry into consulting. I think that's a unique perspective that I don't have. So it'd be good to get your perspective in that regard as well. And then last but not least, we have Adam Cheatham, who's our managing director, recently promoted to managing director, who manages most, if not all, of our global consulting practice. And Adam, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me. I've been in the consulting space for probably about 10 years now, depending on how you look at it. More than that with Eric, for sure. So we got a great background. Comes from an international perspective. I got a degree from the University of Virginia in foreign affairs, and then realized I didn't want to go to live in the DC area anymore after I'd been out of it for long enough. So decided to continue my education into an international business perspective, and just found that my skill set and my drive towards learning how business functions and helping with different types of businesses really is what inspired me to become more of a consultant rather than any particular operational role. My view of business has always been from a global and holistic perspective, not just in singular functional areas. And that's really where my interest in consulting comes from and my background in it. So glad to be here today. Looking forward to seeing some of the comments in the chat. I love to see that we've got people from all over the world. That's always fun to see on these chats. We've got some folks in Europe, some folks in Africa, some folks in the States. I don't think I saw anybody from the APAC region yet, but we'll see what happens throughout the day. But looking forward to really seeing what we come up with here.
Yeah. There's a great audience here. To your point, Adam, just a few examples: Cardiff, Kenya, UK, Denver, Colorado, in the U.S., Hereford, UK, Brussels, Belgium, Sweden, Kuwait, Cork, Ireland, Tampa, Florida, in the U.S., Ohio, in the U.S., Brussels, Belgium, just to name a few. So thanks for being here from all over the world today. And I'm sure there's someone from Asia Pacific that's up really late watching the stream, really late their time. But if you are, I'd love to hear from you. If you're up late at night in Asia Pacific, would love to hear from you as well. So we'll get to audience questions here in a moment. So please start dropping those in the chat as you think of stuff. If there's anything you want to talk about, any topics related to careers in consulting, what it's like to be a consultant, what we like about it, what we don't like, the good, the bad, the ugly, any of that stuff you want to talk about, drop it in the chat. And we'll get to those questions here in a few moments. But first, just to get us started, while we're waiting for the audience to chime in with questions, I guess I wanted to start with you, Nate, and ask you the question of just a real basic question of why did you choose a career in consulting? What is it that it appealed to you when you chose this career?
I think the thing that most appealed to me and 20 years ago and still today is the ability to work with the various different individuals, different organizations, different industries, and different size of firms as well. We here at Third Stage and throughout my career, I've been lucky enough to work with some Fortune 50 companies, have also worked with some really good startup companies here over the last few years where we have 5 to 10 employees and we're just helping them along their paths. So I think for me, first and foremost, it's the variety of people, industries, and size of the clients.
Yeah, that's great. How about you, Scott or Adam? What are some of the reasons why did you guys choose the career?
Much the same, but I'll be even more selfish. I love to eat and travel. And so consulting offers you a lot of variety, and that's kind of what drove me to continue being in consulting. I have left a couple of times and taken on a senior level operational role, but I just missed the opportunity to be challenged, and that's the flexibility of all the clients you get to work with is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I might come back to that point about industry versus consulting and get some of your perspectives on the differences there, especially for those listening in that maybe are in industry or they've got another profession that they're in, but they're thinking about or interested in moving to the consulting space. Yeah. And then Adam, last but not least, what are your thoughts? Why did you choose consulting?
Yeah. So like Scott said, the variety of it is a key part of it. I'm somebody that, like, if you put me in a repetitive role, I will just suffer and not be happy at all. I need that type of stimulation. And I was actually working at large telecommunications company in the Denver area when I got a call from a consulting firm run by Eric Kimberling, and that said, "We have a new client in New Zealand. Would you like to go?" Um, and I said, well, let me think real hard about that.
We need you
So
there Monday.
exactly. So that was kind of a lead in that I needed to get into the industry and really haven't looked. Well, I have looked back once. I did go back to the a more operational role for a little while and just really missed the consulting side of things. It can be quite exhilarating. There's a lot of work to do, of course, but the mental stimulation and the challenges that come along with it are just you can't beat them, and you get a lot of exposure to so many different types of people. The travel can be great, and the food is always a good thing. You get to try things in different places, so that's really kind of how I got into it, and came into it, left, and got bored, and came back, and I just am so glad to be here. And I made the decision to go back to consulting because it's really been a key component of my life, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear that perspective of kind of going back to industry and then realizing how much you miss it, because I've never done anything but consulting, and I always wonder what would I do if I wasn't doing consulting, and I have no idea what I would do, and I can't imagine another
so
career.
Bored.
I know I'd be really bored. I'd be a terrible employee. I probably wouldn't be happy. So I'm sure there's something out there I might like besides consulting, but there is a lot to like about consulting that I can't imagine doing much else. What is it? And you started to get into this, Adam, but maybe we'll start with you on this next question. But what is it you like most about consulting? You mentioned the travel and the variety, diverse experience. You're not bored. What are some of the other things you like most about being in consulting?
Oh yeah, just you're always learning something new. Like I said, I've been doing this for more than 10 years, and I'm still learning new things today, and things that you would never believe happen. Like it never occurred to me that not everybody runs either a 52-week or a 12-month calendar year, but in some industries, it's different. They run it differently, and I'm still learning to understand that financial aspect of it and the key components of how you run a calendar year that isn't, June 1st through May 31st or whatever it may be. But that's fun. So there's always something new to learn. And the interactions with the people and the clients are just, you can't replace them. You get to meet so many different types of people, understand so much of a great holistic view of not just how one business works, but how just the global economy works when you start to understand different industries and how they fit in together and how they complement each other. It's absolutely fascinating. You also get to develop some really great relationships with some folks that you travel with and folks that you work with, whether they're clients or consultants along your side. And the partnerships are just, you can't beat them. You don't get that type of thing in any type of more traditional operational role.
Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Scott? What is it you like most about consulting?
Yeah, there's some repetition to consulting for sure. There are skill sets and processes that are repeated from one client to the other, but it's never the same. And I think that one of the advantages of being a consultant versus somebody who has long tenure at a company is they don't know what other people do. And so you as a consultant are able to provide such a unique perspective. And I know Eric has a soft point when we talk about best practices. You could literally never take an exact process from another company and move it to another company. Industry is different, size of the company is different, the integrations and technology is different, the staff is different. So there's always going to be some unique challenges for every client, even if you're doing the same project over and over again. It's always a different roadmap, and a little bit to what Adam mentioned is I'm still amazed that I'm still learning stuff. It is such a unique thing to get into consulting and go to the same client after 10 years and they're doing things dramatically different and you have to get up to speed. And that challenge or that motivation to kind of get up to speed is what I really like about consulting. The fact that the clients kind of treat you as a confidant and kind of have a lot of hallway conversations and conference rooms where they pull you to the side saying, tell me the truth, right? How's the team doing? How are the staff doing? Because we have the perspective that the clients usually don't.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you could, what I always find fascinating is there's times where we'll come in and we'll make recommendations or observe things or provide insights that are in some cases, they're similar to what the employees internally are saying or are feeling, But the fact that you're an outside consultant, it's just viewed differently. It's got more credibility, and it always amazes me that that perceived the perceived value that comes from outside consultants is so much higher, which can be flattering at times, but it's also just an interesting dynamic as well. Yeah, that's great. What about you, Nate? What are some of the things that you like best about consulting that we haven't talked about?
I think just to add to what Adam and Scott said, I think it's interesting too that you do have that unique perspective, and we do a lot of digital transformation projects, and we deal with a lot of companies that have stalled in their either an implementation or a transformation. And I think it's really interesting to see the similarities that companies, while Adam kind of referred to how different companies are, I think it's also real interesting and real rewarding to see that everyone's going through similar challenges. Everyone has their own secret sauce, and sorry for an overused phrase, but I think everyone within their company does a really good job with what they do uniquely, but they're all facing some pretty similar challenges. So our ability to come in and say, we've seen this, we've seen it 100 times, we've seen best practices, we've seen leading practices. Here's how we can give you a roadmap to get out of what your challenges are and to get through the roadblocks that you're experiencing is really not only rewarding, but it's also fun to be able to keep taking those skills that we're learning from the client, mastering them more and implementing them with new experiences.
Yeah. Well said. What about on the flip side, though? I'd be curious to hear why, Nate. What is it you like least about consulting? Every career has a dark side, or things that aren't as fun as other jobs. What is it you like least about consulting, or what have you seen other consultants struggle with in the field of consulting?
I think for me the biggest challenge is we are there for just a short window of time. So we will help a client from inception to go live. Obviously, we'd like to be involved in an organization after the system goes live and after they start to experience some of the advantages of implementing a new system. But I think with me, it's a little bit of that unfinished business. It's that you don't have ownership from beginning to end. Eventually, you have to leave a client and you move on to the next client. So for me, it's that not being able to really see something through fruition for a year or two down the road.
Yeah, that's a great point. You build all these relationships and you become close to a client, and then you're gone, because you've completed whatever the project is, and that can be it's rewarding in some ways because you get to meet so many different people and so many different clients. But on the flip side, you have to move on and you don't own it, longer term, which is a good point. How about you, Scott? What is it you like? What are some of the things you like least about it so far?
Yeah, it's kind of the literally the opposite of why I like it. If you want, not stability, that's the wrong word to use, but if you want consistency and going to the same place every day, working from that location, consulting may be a challenge for you. There's always a struggle with consulting from a work-life balance. Many of us at Third Stage have worked with the Big Four before. I've been with KPMG as well as Deloitte. And I've been on projects where you literally are traveling on Sunday and coming back on Thursday or Friday every single week for years. I think consulting has changed a lot from that perspective. We are not a huge kind of staffing model at this point where we put 30 people on a consulting project and they have to be there every week. I think we found a nice balance here. I also don't want to travel every week anymore, but I like the variety. And many of our clients, especially through the whole COVID experience, have really found the positive aspects of being remote. Teams and tools like that have allowed for consultants to operate before or after having to go through the experience of being on site every single day. So, but if you like that process, right, you want to drive down the same street to the same office every single day, but you like the sexiness of consulting, that may not be what you are going to use to move over to the consulting world. But I think if you like the variety, it's great. If you want that consistency of the same workplace every year, that might be a challenge.
Yeah, it's not as predictable as other careers. Yep. There's always curveballs coming at you too, because you you're dealing with client challenges and client problems that you're trying to solve, and that inherently means that there's some uncertainty and unknown that comes along with that.
Yep.
Yeah, great point. How about you, Adam? What are some of the things that you dislike the most or have seen other consultants struggle with in the consulting field?
Well, I think I'd rather take it from a perspective of what I've seen other consultants struggle with, because I love what I do, and I bury myself in it sometimes to the detriment of, what happens at home. Sometimes I get stuck up in my office for longer than I want to, or than I ought to, maybe, because I love what I do. It's a ton of fun. It's exhilarating in a lot of ways. But what I see a lot of folks struggle with is that when the time commitment is high, it is high, and the expectations are that you match it. There isn't a whole lot of room for, I just don't have time for that. When you need to travel, you need to travel, and if you can't find somebody to watch your dog, that's not my problem. And the consulting industry can be a whole lot like that. A client's not going to really, they're going to see the rate that they're paying for you, and they're not going to worry that you've got to find somebody to take care of those things. So the level of commitment is, especially when you find some success in it, is quite high, especially during peak times. And that's a part of the deal. Some people really enjoy that. The workaholic nature of things can actually be really quite suited to consulting, but it can also be a double-edged sword in that if you get too deep into it and you can't balance for yourself, your consulting firm is not going to balance your life for you. So that's something that we see a lot of folks struggle with. The other part of it is, in a lot of consulting firms, the pace is fast. And if you are not a self-starter and you are not disciplined to have your own drive, people aren't going to help you and drag you along. If they find that they're dragging you, they're going to let go, and they're just going to let you fall and let the rest sort itself out. So I think those are some of the things that we really see folks struggle with consulting is just the level of commitment. It is, for those of us who live this, it is something that is far more exhilarating than general operations, but the pace is faster, and the demands are higher, and that's because your clients are charged a rate for your time by the hour, and so the expectations for that are high, and that's just a part of it. So I think that's important to recognize that if you're somebody that needs repetition and needs a lot of guidance and helping figuring things out and a lot of double checking and things like that, maybe try something in a different field than consulting or than you're in right now if you're not satisfied. But if this is you and you just can't get enough of just digging in, then maybe consulting is a great career for you, because it's really, for me, more about the skill sets that you have and what it is you bring to the table from an innate capabilities perspective than it is about specific experience. And I saw Deep Patel in here ask about specific experience in specific software packages. The ability to learn is really more important. Great Salesforce experience is really dynamic. It's important. But at the same time, the ability to learn what other software packages can look like and to apply the lessons that you've learned in working with Salesforce to those other packages and knowing where it is they are complementary in nature, that's what makes a good consultant, being able to leverage your experiences into something bigger rather than something more niche and minute.
Yeah. Well said. And I think, one of the things that I'd be curious to get your guys' feedback on, one of the things I've seen other consultants struggle with, and I struggle with this at times too, is the idea or the fact that a lot of times clients are under a lot of pressure. They're hiring you as a consultant because there's something going on in their organization that they can't solve themselves. It's either a big change initiative or some sort of problem you're trying to solve. And with that comes a lot of pressure, and your problems or the client's problems become your problems as a consultant. And oftentimes I found that you end up spending a lot of your time as sort of a therapist. You're a therapist for the clients, because you have to listen, you have to understand, you have to empathize, you have to understand the pressure they're going through. And I've seen a lot of consultants struggle with that, where the pressure of that and just the stress of that gets to them. Have you guys seen that or had issues with that yourselves?
Yeah, I'll say. By the way, you can hear me okay right now?
Yep.
One of the things that we talk about from a project management perspective, but it also speaks to your role as a consultant on the client side, is what is your definition of success, right? Clients do hire consultants, hire third stage often to solve problems they can't solve on their own. But we want to make sure that they don't put our company, our project, or you as an individual in a situation where you have a no-win out. So going through the challenge of, even if it's a challenging aspect of the role, you can create more bite-sized aspects of it and work towards that to be successful. Because you need to make sure that you have a path forward that helps remove, I think, or at least reduce a lot of the anxieties that maybe even I have felt in the past. Of, wow, this is this monumental hill that we have to climb. You don't climb Everest to the top in one day, right? So getting the project and getting your role into more bite-sized components helps you kind of achieve maybe a longer-term success than if you looked at the big mountains and expected to climb that in one day.
Yeah, it's well said. About Adam or Nate, have you seen that dynamic at play as well?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things about that. Not just climbing the whole mountain as opposed to in pieces, but I think the amount of pressure is a key component of it, especially when you're talking about large transformations like what we do. Somebody hired you, and their job is dependent on your success, and you can only imagine what that drives people to do when they need you to perform at their level of expectations and the level of expectations that are set for them. And so that's the bar you have to match. It's not my expectations of you. It's not your team's expectations of you. It's the clients. And if you fail, their job may be at risk. And that's a big responsibility. On the flip side of it, though, there's something so rewarding for being able to coach somebody through these types of programs, right? As a consultant, you don't make the decisions for your client. You make the recommendations and they follow them, right? Because of your good guidance and because of the way that you've approached this and helped them through that challenge. And then you get to see them be successful. Sometimes after the fact, maybe sometimes a while later. I actually talked to a couple of folks this week that we worked with them on their implementations, and now they've come back a year later and said, man, you guys were just so awesome. We've done such a great job. We've had all of these great wins. We love seeing that feedback loop. But the coaching side of it is something that if you thrive in that type of an environment and being able to provide advisory to folks and see them be successful, that's a great, great sync with how consulting works.
Yeah. Well said. Agree.
And I think to add on one thing to that is when you think about, you mentioned therapists, that you play somewhat of a therapist role, but I think true to form with the therapist is their job is not, and our job as consultants a lot of times is to let the client talk through their problems and explore solutions and to validate or invalidate their solutions. So letting a client who knows likely what the answer is to their problem use you as a sounding board and really challenge them to consider other paths or to consider going deeper into the path that they're on, and really just talking through things with them and telling them here's what we've seen at other clients that's worked, here's what they've had challenges with, and really letting them come up with the solution on their own.
Yeah makes sense. I agree with that. Just to circle back and close the loop on the whole question of do we have anyone from Asia Pacific here? I have spotted our first known person from Asia Pacific. We have Suwana on YouTube who's joining from Thailand. So thank you for being here super late at night, Suwana.
We got a couple of India folks from India in there too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, there are several from India here. In fact, here's a comment from Sarika from India. And Sarika says, I'm being a consultant for the last 15 years, especially in ERP, payroll, CLM, and S2P. I love doing it. So at least Sarika listening in is a consultant and confirms that it's a great career, at least for that person's needs and wants. We talked about the question about how important it is to have experience with multiple systems, types of technology before you get into tech consulting. I guess maybe just to build on that question a little bit, even though we answered that question already, it sort of triggered another thought, which is how do you? A lot of times I get questions on social media from people that ask, what system should I focus on? If I'm going to pick, I know I want to go into tech consulting. Should I pick Salesforce? Should I pick SAP or Workday or Oracle or Microsoft? Do you guys have recommendations on that? I know it's a little bit hard for us to answer that question, I admit, because we're independent and technology agnostic, and we as a company deal with multiple technologies, but that's pretty rare. Most consulting firms focus on one type of technology. So what are your guys' thoughts of that? What advice would you give to someone who asked that question?
I think you can. I'll jump in, and I think there's two different paths, and I think you can. We deal a lot with very technical resources, so we deal with people that will come in and they're going to be the Salesforce expert. They're going to help you set up the system, configure the system, know how to set up the security and the roles and all those really technical side. And then we've got people, and I think it's Scott and Adam and I probably fall in more into that field where you're comfortable with technology. And I don't want to say that all technology is the same. Obviously it's not, but I think it's in consulting, it's getting that rhythm and getting that familiarity and getting that comfort level with technology, and coming in and learning enough about the technology that you're able to add value to your clients, but not being so deep that you pigeonhole yourself into one specific technology. So it's a little bit of that, becoming familiar with the unknown. And it's also, like I said, you can choose a role that lets you get really deep into one product, but then you really are deep into that one product.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to kind of my previous role as faculty, a lot of students would ask me that, right? Where do I go from here if I want to get into consulting? And really the ask from me is to really focus on what you think are your inherent skill sets that you've developed in school, what you've developed in work, and also what your industry focus is, because that would then drive what tools that you might want to get into. I will say it really kind of depends on whether you're 23 or you're 42, because how you get into consulting, if you're not already in it now, is through networking, it's through what you know or what you can do. I can't tell you how many times clients may or may not have known I've never worked in industry, but you're good in running a project. You're good in motivating folks who know the deep technical aspect that Nate mentioned. But the project was successful. So it's more about, do you want to be a developer? Do you want to be somebody who builds integrations? Or do you want to work in a space where Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, Inforex, Epicor exist? And the knowledge of those tools will come. I will tell you that I don't think any of us on this call could program an application. If we did, it's such a dated software language that it's probably not applicable anymore. But I would say that being able to speak the lingo and understand what the lingo is, and being very clear about what you feel comfortable within your wheelhouse versus the stretch that we'll talk about maybe before we close out, is really more important than do I focus on one application or not. It's just a function of, you can always go to work for a software company themselves if that's the space you want to work in. But from a consulting standpoint, those consultants that we supply to clients on the third stage are much more focused on the process of getting a project over the finish line than it is the technical nature. Because as Nate mentioned, many of the software companies will provide technical resources on an implementation. We are there to be the glue to get them over the hump. And you will just pick up technology as it happens. I just don't think that I can answer your question straightforward, Eric, on which technology to focus on.
Well, a lot of it depends too on the type of consulting firm you want to work for. Yeah. If you want to work for one of the really big system integrators, you pretty much have to specialize. I mean, you have to not only pick a software, but you also have to pick a module typically within that software to specialize in. And oftentimes you're picking an industry as well. And so it becomes a little bit more specialized, I'd say, for some of those larger firms. But you look at a mid-sized company like Third Stage, that, we've got 70 people, not hundreds of thousands of people like some of the big system integrators, where, we value more breadth of experience, having understanding of multiple systems. Of course, that has less to do with our size and more to do with the fact that we're technology agnostic and independent. But a lot of those bigger firms do specialize. And then I think as you go to some of the smaller firms too, though, I think that's where the breadth, becomes more relevant than the depth necessarily.
I will add to that, if you don't mind, Eric, is that even if you start with a big four and work in a particular industry, a particular technology package, eventually you're going to have to get out of that. Most people want to grow in their role, grow within the organization. And at some point, you're not going to be a technical analyst anymore. So even if you take that path, you need to understand what it takes to get to leadership, to a management role, if you want to do that, obviously. And that's where the skill sets that we're talking about related to the third stage really comes into play. But I agree with you, Erica. Bigger firms, you're going to jump in there, but you may not stay there very long if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually really like that point where I always thought about in my career, and when folks come and ask me, how do I build a career in this type of a field? It's not about the job you're about to take. It's about the job that you're going to have after that. And how does this get you there? So where do you want to be? Should I specialize in SAP or Oracle? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? There are some answers that drive different paths in that. Should I specialize in CRM or HCM, sales technology versus human resources technology? Where do you want to be? Do you want to work with companies to expand their sales platforms? Then think about CRM. Do you have more of a human resources and recruiting type of fit to your skill set, and that's what drives you? Then look at HCM, right? So your career path can't really be ignored in the one step. It's the steps that happen after, and that's really what's for me the key to it, and developing skill sets that help you drive there, so that you can create this more holistic career with where it is you'd like to head.
Right. Yeah. Well said. We've got some other feedback from team members here, audience members, I should say. I don't see the individual names, so I apologize for that. But someone on LinkedIn says in solution architect and solution designer, for mostly involved in telco, FSM, WFM. It's a lot of acronyms there. Subject matter expert in that field. So sounds like we've got some consultants that are already in the field providing some feedback here, which is great. Another comment from LinkedIn, and again, I don't see the name of the person, but the person says, I do enjoy digital transformation and ERP consulting. I had the opportunity to travel around many countries. The latest success was with the United Nations. January 2023 went live with Oracle Cloud. So that's sounds like a big, massive, cool project. So that's pretty cool. And again, I apologize, I don't know your name, whoever that is. So I'll have to go to LinkedIn after this and watch the restream to see who that is. Here's a question, though, from an audience member on YouTube. And this is a really, I consider this sort of $1 million question for people that maybe aren't in consulting yet. Either they're just out of college or university, or they're in industry and they want to break into consulting. Do you guys have any strategies or tips or things you would recommend to help someone break into consulting or join a consulting firm or get the attention of a consulting firm? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll take that first one. A couple things is everyone's familiar with writing a resume, right? But they're usually a historical review of the roles you've had. The first step I would consider is if you know anything about project management, and if not, obviously, internet's a great source of that. Try and identify the skill sets that you have already in place, independent of the roles that you've had. So if you've led a team, period, no matter what industry, no matter what you've done. So kind of focus on that a little bit as well. But one of the things I'm really, I guess I shouldn't say surprised, but I'm highly encouraged by a lot of the clients that we've worked with in the past. There are internal consultants, they just never call themselves that. And so there are almost an endless list of projects that never get started within an organization because nobody wants to take the initiative to pony up working on a task team or working on that aspect. So I would highly encourage you to seek out opportunities if you are fully employed right now of helping the company do things outside of your wheelhouse. And that's going to be a great way to figure out whether you like that, but also would help you in conversations with consulting firms to demonstrate that initiative and also describe what you've learned in there, right? I teach or used to teach project management along with operations, and it's amazing just the lingo of being in my class has helped a lot of the students get either internships or jobs after graduation because they know what a work breakdown structure is. They know what a project charter is. And so getting your hands wet internally within your own organization is probably a great way to figure out if you like it first, and second, whether you can parlay that into a job in consulting if you want to leave.
Yeah, great points. I think that what I've seen with people that I've coached or mentored on how to get into consulting is that most people that I talk to have more relevant experience than they realize.
Yeah.
You know, they come to me with the problem of, well, I've never done consulting. How can I possibly be a consultant? And at the same time, you start to ask questions. Well, tell me about your background. What have you done? And they start talking about, I was a supply chain manager, or I did business process improvement, or I helped design business processes for my internal company. Well, those are super relevant. Or project management. I was a project manager for this project. Wasn't ERP, wasn't digital transformation, but you were a project manager. So focus on the project manager part of it versus what you haven't done.
Exactly.
And I think there's a lot of that. Even someone out of college, it's a little bit harder if you're just coming out of university. But if you're coming out of your university, first of all, if you're in university, I would highly suggest you get an internship or something that gives you some sort of relevant experience, because that will be a game changer for you in terms of getting the attention of recruiters. But beyond that, you also look to the things you learn in school. If you can, to your point, Scott, if you can talk the lingo, what's important, you can at least speak the language of consulting, then that's going to have a huge impact on getting the attention of people as well.
I want to throw in something else that's kind of an interesting take on it. That it's not it's a service-oriented industry, right? This consulting is professional services. That's what we do. And right. Being service-oriented is a key component of, at least an indicator of success, I think, within the consulting industry on the whole. My background before consulting starts with fine dining and food service, understanding somebody's needs and then helping them address them. Now, from a consulting perspective, that's a whole lot more complex than steak or chicken, right. But still, your role is to meet somebody where they are and understand what it is they need. If you combine that with a general and holistic approach to understanding how business functions, and you're in a pretty good spot to leverage some skill sets that are important in consulting. Now you throw in some more industry specific knowledge, some skill sets like program management, business analysis, business liaison, those types of things, networking, and you've got a skill set that could work in this space. That's important as far as I'm concerned, more especially at the starting rate, at the starting line, than the 40 years of experience in this industry. Yeah, now you're a subject matter expert that has a very specified role, but from a breadth perspective, I can take those skill sets and I can apply those and I can help you learn the depth. They're just, everybody's heard the hard work will trump talent every time, but talent's not unimportant. Talent is a set of skills that you have that are innate to you, that you've built over time. That's, if you're just starting to get into consulting, find the right firm, like a Third Stage or somebody else that can help you hone those skills and apply them, teach you how to do that, then you're in a real great spot to start working into the industry long term.
And you have to define what are the skills, like what are the important skills of being a consultant. And you've got the hard skills and the soft skills. The hard skills are a bit easier to get or to learn, as far as learning a certain technology or a certain industry or business process, whatever the case may be. But it's the soft skills that I found are really hard to find. And so if you're, you mentioned your food service experience, Adam, and I, when I was 15 years old, I started working mainly so I could buy a car because my parents didn't have the money to buy me one. So I knew I had to work to buy a car when I turned 16. So when I was 15, I started working in food service as well, customer service based jobs. And I did that all through high school. And I swear that those 3 years of doing that sort of work, I think that's more important in the skills that I gained during that time than some of the stuff I learned in college. And the reason was because I dealt with really difficult customers. I had to listen. I had to be patient. I had to understand. And that's the communication, the way you respond to those stressors and that sort of thing. That to me is really important and underrated in consulting. And I've seen a lot of consultants that are brilliant consultants on, in terms of the hard skills, but they didn't have those soft skills and they fail as consultants, or they're just not effective because they can't do both. And you have to be able to do both. You have to have the hard skills and the soft skills. So I always look at, I actually, when I look at resumes, if I see someone that has a food service or some sort of customer service based background, that's super appealing to me, because I think, okay, I can't teach you how to deal with stress or how to deal with difficult clients. I can't teach you that. I can teach you the other stuff. I can teach you the technology and the business process and the hard stuff, but I can't teach you how to deal with a really difficult client, or at least I can't do it within a reasonable amount of time. So that customer service based background is really important. So if you have that, if you're, listening in and you're thinking, well, I have some of that experience, I would definitely highlight that. And more importantly, translate that for your target audience of what that means to being an effective consultant. If you can say, I was in customer service for X number of years or however long, I learned how to do whatever it was, communicate with people, deal with difficult customers, whatever. You want to highlight some of those things as well. How about you, Nate? Anything you'd add to that?
I think, and I'll kind of put the three legs of a stool answer to this, because I think it's hard work, or it's having the hard skills and the soft skills, and then I also think it's getting in and for the most part, when you enter a consulting organization, especially if you're coming out of college or you don't have a lot of consulting skills, pick one project that you're going to be working on, figure out what success means in that project, and do it really well. I read the other day, as an analogy, I read about one of the newly hired NFL coaches here started as a receiver coach, and he talked about how it was just a really small, kind of insignificant job, but he did it really well, and he learned how it interacted with all the rest of the team, both on an offense and a defense side, and really started to learn the whole organization from that one position. So I would say, get the soft skills, learn the soft skills, learn the hard skills, but also with whatever you start out with, do it really well, lock in, whether it's being on a project and your learning requirements, do it the best that you can, and really figure out where that fits in to the whole scheme of the overall project and how it's going to benefit the organization as well.
Yeah, really well put.
I'll tell you one thing, the initiative part of being a consultant, I can't stress that enough. And I have a gauge and how to judge new consultants that I work with on a project, especially if it's a new project and it's the first time I've flown to this client, let's say. I know I have the right people when we get in the car and two of them already have their phone open with the map of how to get the directions. When I know there's a struggle with anybody that I work with for the first time, is I get in and somehow they thought because I'm driving, I have to give the directions too. And I'd rather have that initiative, people gone, here are three alternatives, the alternate routes to get to that client. And they're helping me be successful in getting to the client. It's something very simple, but it's sort of like if I had to ask you to give me directions, I have a feeling that that's how I have to potentially work with you. And I'd rather have somebody come up with like, hey, I have three ideas. Do you want to talk about it? Kind of thing. I want that initiative, the motivation to be there for anybody that gets a consultant, even some of the senior folks on this call right now.
Right. Yeah, it's also that's a really interesting point, Scott. I hadn't thought of that, but it is a good litmus test, and it sort of reminds me of people ask me, how do you choose cultural fit, and we're all about culture at Third Stage, and that's something that's really important to me, is making sure that we build a strong culture. And I always use the litmus test. I use it similar to your directions to the hotel sort of, or directions to the client sort of litmus test. Is I always use a litmus test of, if I get stranded at an airport because my flight gets delayed for say 4 hours, and I'm stuck with you at an airport at an airport bar, would I enjoy that time? Do I think I would enjoy hanging out, being stuck in an airport with that person? And if I answer the question yes, I think I would, then it's as simple as it sounds. I think that's probably a pretty good cultural fit. If I feel like, no, that'd be kind of a drag, I don't know if I'd enjoy that time, then that might mean it's and that sounds super superficial in some ways, but in other ways it's you have to look at those simple little things to see, to gauge cultural fit.
I think something else that I really like to look for is a sense of humility, right?
Kyler called it. She knows me too well. She's heard me say it too many times. She knew I was going to bring up the airport thing, so she beat me to the punch.
There you go. Well, humility is a key component of this too, right? And that's enjoyable in an airport when you're stuck there by yourself and not like this is all about me and how miserable this is for me. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
this is where we are. Like, how miserable you may be stuck in the airport with me is not going to change the fact that you are stuck in an airport with me.
Right.
It's also important to just understand that you're going to make recommendations to clients, and they're going to look at you and say, nope. And you got to be able to handle that, right? So not only handle that and understand that it's the client's prerogative not to take your recommendation if they don't want to, but they understand things that and have a vision of their business that you won't, and they probably know things that you don't because they're intentionally not sharing their secret strategies and things like that. So when somebody says that's a great recommendation, we are going to ignore it and go the opposite direction, that will happen. It happens on the regular. And so your job as a consultant isn't to get upset because you feel like they just insulted you by telling you your recommendation is not the path they'll go, but to say, all right, cool. You know what? You want to go a different direction? Here's how I can help with that instead. I can help you work through the risks of the direction you're going to go. And this is what those look like so that you're enabled. So it's not about being right. It's about being service oriented, and a humility to that is something that I've seen some consultants that don't have really struggle with clients who say, nope, not going to do that. We're going to do something totally different. So that's a key component of it that I think is important.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that, by the way. And I've got a closing question I'm going to get to in just a second, but I have to ask this question because I think it's a really good one. And I'll just ask you this, Scott, because I think you might have a unique perspective here. Oh shoot, where was it? So it's from AK over on YouTube. Asked the question of, does having an MBA degree in leadership skills give an edge in a consulting career? And then just to backdrop here, I have an MBA at the time in my career. At that time in the late '90s, it was totally worth it to me, and I'm glad I got my MBA. However, I don't know if I have a good answer for this now, and so I'd be curious to see what you think, Scott. Is it worth having an MBA? Does it help you in the career of consulting?
It kind of goes a little bit piggybacking on what Adam mentioned about where do you want to end up. I do not think that an MBA is mandatory to get into consulting. I think that being inquisitive about learning and being able to adopt and to gain traction on anything you do is probably more important. If you're smart, if you can absorb experiences, you could start in consulting much sooner than somebody who is going to work in industry for 2, 3, 4 years, go get an MBA, and expect to go work at Booz or work at some of the elite schools, elite consulting firms. So, but those are rare and far between, right?
Yeah.
It's much better to have practical experience and a history of proving that you can overcome obstacles and that you've grown in your role. So, in another way of saying that, if you have 27 years of working in the same role, same department, that's more like 2 or 3 years times 10, right? You're not really growing and developing. So if you can prove that as attraction in your current job, I think that's going to be much more beneficial. One nice thing that's going on in the market, at least in the United States, is a very tight labor pool. So if you can demonstrate that you can adapt and get thrown into a situation and be successful, that's probably more important than having a pedigree where the MBA used to be a requirement. I think all of us have a graduate degree, I think. And I would say that that's great if you want to transition. So if you're in an industry or you're a construction worker and you want to go work in consulting, getting an MBA is probably a good track to go because that gives you the baseline to get into it. But I think if you're just smart and experienced and show that you've been in situations to learn and grow, I think that's probably more valuable now than an MBA.
Yeah, I do want to point something out though. How many MBAs on the call right now? 4 of them. So
all 4 of us have MBAs.
So to qualify that, I think that this is a correlation rather than a causation type of thing, right? The type of folks who go and get an MBA they're inquisitive by nature. They are seeking knowledge, which is a great skill set to have for a consultant. and highly correlated towards success. So an MBA doesn't mean that you're on a consultant track, and you don't have to have an MBA to be on a consultant track, but they are correlated in nature because they share some of the same types of skill sets and inquisitive natures that drive both industries. So I think that's important to note. But at the same time, it's background comes in many different forms. Diversity of background is a key component to a large consulting firm, and something that we look for at Third Stage as well. So it's not like we say, all right, that person is an MBA, they get a job. It's can they add value with the diversity of their background that they bring to the table?
Let me qualify, because I'm not disagreeing with you, Adam. It's that education is important. The degree is less. Education is very important. I have many degrees and many certifications, so I'm not speaking from a platform of just wing it and just get job experience. It's education. Learn and use that correctly. I know I've had technical folks that I've worked with that have 15 different acronyms after their name. They couldn't talk in a meeting. They couldn't lead somebody at all, right? So education or degrees just for the sake of it, maybe not. But if you parlay that into what you know, who you are, you can probably be successful in a lot of different avenues.
Yep, agreed.
And there's a lot of ways to get the skills you need too. Beyond an MBA, you've got PMP certifications or ProSci certification if you're interested in change management. There's Lean Six Sigma certification. There's a lot of lower hanging fruit, I guess you could say. If you're willing to invest some time and money, maybe not 2 years for an MBA and however much money it costs to get an MBA nowadays. There's other options as well. So there's a lot of different ways to develop the skills you need. And I think the key is to recognize and be creative about how you develop those skills and how you sell those skills to your potential consulting employer. So really good stuff. I really appreciate your guys' time. Time flies by when you're talking about something fun like this, but we are up against our top of the hour here. So we'll wrap it up. But I want to thank you guys for your unique perspectives. And for those of you listening on the audience, if you are interested in careers at Third Stage Consulting, we are growing very aggressively, very quickly, and we are constantly growing our team. We'd love to hear from you. You can email you could ping any of the four of us on LinkedIn. So if you find us on LinkedIn, you can ping any of the four of us that are here on the panel, or you can email work@thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also go to our website. You'll find a careers page on there where you can also submit your details, and that'll get to our recruiting group. And again, that's work@thirdstage-consulting.com. So we'd love to hear from you if you are interested. And even if you feel like you don't have experience in consulting, or maybe you've done some consulting, you're looking for something different, we'd love to hear from you. We tend to I think we're pretty good at finding and connecting the dots between relevant experience and what it takes to be a good consultant. So love to hear from you. So thank you guys for being here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for being here. Again, this interview will become part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast that gets released a week from tomorrow. Be sure to check that out and subscribe if you don't already. And we do this live stream every Tuesday, same time, same place. So thanks for being here. Hope you all have a great week, and we will see you all soon.
Thanks everyone.